The clue is in the name. Proper food storage and appropriate mechanism that is legit and widely used by cooks especially to keep foods in a particular place for future use has been explored and dissected into simplicity.
Food storage is one of the most important aspects in our auditing and inspection procedures. As you rightly said, we think of so many modalities that are the systems that we always put in place for foods to be preserved so that they will not be consumed and then be harmful to consumers. So one of these is refrigeration.
The process is inevitably meant to prevent spoilage, mold, and others from spreading among foods in a refrigerator, for instance.
The foods we preserve with refrigeration, mostly they are fresh foods.
Or there can be more to it.
The advantages with food preservation using refrigerators is that food can stay as long as there is electricity, and food can stay as long as the storage conditions and the temperature level is met.
Our Risk Communications Officer Halimatu Balde takes us through some recommended set rules of food storage.
Now we have a lot of diseases. We have a lot of microorganisms in the air compared to before. So the best advice I will give to our mothers and our sisters, let them preserve meat, or let them preserve food, but in such a way that it meets all the hygiene requirements in terms of handling, in terms of storage.
Perhaps one may think that when they throw food in their fridge, it does all the work. But our Risk Communications Officer refuted this. She said it is not that simple. Mrs. Balde said the best way to keep food, including leftovers, fresher, longer, and reduce the risk of cross-contaminations of raw and cooked or fresh and processed, among others, however, is by following the laid-down best practices she explained on tape.
Like foods that you have already cooked, you want to store them in the refrigerator, there are ways of storing them in the refrigerator. Like the meat, is a high-risk group. It has to be down in the refrigerator, and the other foods that are of a low risk have to be up. The tendency here for them to contaminate the high risk food group, to contaminate the low risk food group is very high when they mix. You have to cook the meat to a temperature in order to kill all the microorganisms. So if these foods are mixed together, the tendency for cross-contamination to occur is very high. And these are some of the issues that we are seeing in our homes. These are some of the issues that we are encountering in our shops, in our corner shops. This is a disadvantage. And secondly, as you rightly said, we have foods that have to meet the required temperature. There are some foods that you have to store at a temperature of less than or up to minus 18 degrees Celsius. Frozen foods, for instance, they have to get frozen.
Taking meat, fish, and poultry as a case study, these, he explained, are best kept on the bottom shelf since it helps prevent cross-contamination between processed foods and raw meats. Meat, for example, is a high-risk food. It comes from animals that can carry bacteria, which might make us sick. Because of this, storing meat safely to prevent the growth of any bacteria that may be present is important.
We consume a lot of meat also, although we have our locally produced meat, but you can see in the markets, we don't have the market to sell meat to a large extent. So the only way we preserve our meat is by refrigeration. Our inspectors can attest to that.
Bacteria particularly can multiply rapidly and cause food to spoil or make it unsafe. Bacteria itself produce the slime, toxins of colors, and others associated with food spoilage. However, disease-causing bacteria can grow without changing the odor, color, or texture of the food. For this reason, keeping meat cold enough to prevent bacterial growth or heating it to a temperature which kills them is critical. Food spoilage bacteria grow best at environmental temperatures of 70 degrees to 100 degrees.
When we go out to the field, we see a lot of refrigerators that are storing meat. So this is also another way of preserving meat, food using refrigerators. The advantage is that food can stay long as far as there is electricity as far as the refrigerator is in good condition. For instance, our inspectors go right inside the field, and then one of the most common problem that we encounter are the meat sellers. Meat sellers all over the country have refrigerators, but can you believe me, most of 90% of these refrigerators are not connected to electricity. How they preserve this meat that they sell to consumers is by buying ice blocks. They buy ice blocks, put them on top of the meat, and this meat will stay overnight. How reliable is this to our meat that we consume on a daily basis?
Halimatu knows better, but Mohammed, a supermarket owner, knows it best.
When you keep meat and foodstuffs in the freezer, it will not spoil. Raw meat and fruits should not keep it in equal temperatures. It should keep it in different temperatures. Meat always keep in more freezable. It will kill the bacteria, whatever it is. Prevents diseases and cause contaminations.
Nonetheless, Halimatu has highlighted certain disadvantages associated with refrigeration. This, he noted, might bring microorganisms back into the meat and render it unsafe.
Is that if there is cut in electricity that is not constant, is not reliable, obviously food cannot stay long. And then in that case, food can get spoiled. Meat, for instance, can easily get spoiled if there is no electricity. Microorganisms can grow very wild, they can grow very fast in hot conditions. So if the refrigerator is not working in a perfect condition, obviously these foods can get spoiled. Once the electricity is disconnected, then the growth of microorganism is also fasting again. It grows rapidly, and that is even more dangerous than not storing food in a refrigerator.
Fish too can be easily stored in a fridge at lower temperatures by ice or ice packs. By laying your fish fillets or clean whole fish on top of ice, one can decrease the temperature to about 32 degrees, which will help keep fresh for up to 2 or 3 days. This is why fishmongers always have plenty of crushed ice on hand. Commenting on the drying aspect of fish and meat by people living in the hard-to-reach areas that are not connected to electricity, Halima would not discourage it. Nevertheless, she would advise for it to be done in the best hygienic way possible.
In as much as they store meat that has been steamed, let it be kept tight in a place far away from pests. Pests in this case, it has to be far away from flies, it has to be far away from cockroaches, because all these are things that can contribute to food contamination, and it can finally harm the consumer.
Other foods that should be stored in a fridge are eggs. Contrary to what many think, that there is no need to keep eggs in a fridge, and more often than not, they expose them to heat. Balde said eggs are kept on the middle shelf of the fridge, where the temperature is most consistent. This, he remarked, would prevent spoilage and food poisoning. She further went on to insist that the cold chain in eggs preservation must be maintained.
Eggs are very perishable foods. These are foods that can get spoiled at any minute. The cold chain, as far as preserving food is concerned, it has not been broken up to the final consumer. Inspection procedures deems it that eggs that come from outside the countries are always put in containers that are connected to electricity, and they are cold until at the time of delivery to the final consumer. This is one way of preserving eggs, because without that, eggs cannot stay long without getting spoiled, without causing food poisoning to the consumer. We all know that we consume a lot of imported eggs in this country, and the only way of preserving eggs is by refrigeration.
The public could recollect the recent move by the Food Safety and Quality Authority to confiscate a container laden with about 640 cartons of badly rotten eggs that were deemed unfit for consumption. The spoilage was caused by bad storage mechanisms put in place by the owner, according to investigations. These eggs were then disposed of later at an undisclosed area. The development then served as an eye-opener that eggs have to be stored in cold places.
The importers are very much crucial in this area as far as food safety is concerned. They are the ones that import foods, and they know the way they should preserve their food. So my advice to them is to ensure that the cold chain, as far as preserving food is concerned, it has not been broken up to the final consumer.
Moving forward, salads and other vegetables, he hinted, prefer to be stored in less humid places or not extremely cold. The vegetable and salad drawer is the moistest compartment in the fridge. For dairy foods such as milk, cottage cheese, cream, and yogurt, Mrs. Valdez said, they too must be stored on the bottom shelf of the fridge. As for hard cheese, however, they can be stored anywhere. One just has to be sure to remove it from the fridge an hour before serving it, as hard cheeses taste better at room temperatures. Ready-to-eat foods such as butter and soft cheeses can be stored in the door shelves. It won't cause any harm, and these food items do not need to be extra cold. One may probably never fathom why most manufacturers have designed refrigerators with the idea that people store milk and other liquid foods in the refrigerator door. The undeniable fact is that it is the fridge area that gets the biggest temperature fluctuation. Sometimes we also put milk on the top shelf of the fridge, and that is another mistake. Many land food scientists recommended storing milk on the middle shelf or the bottom, where it is coldest. Consumers too know the benefits of taste. To them, it is the best preservation method.
Because in a refrigerator, you can store food for nothing more than 3 days, or approximately 48 hours as well. Storing food in a refrigerator is very important and ideal because it avoids food poisoning. You can store your food safely at the right temperature.
So my advice to consumers also, let them buy foods that they know they are sure of. Never buy foods that are spoiled. Never go to the market, bring out your own money and go and buy food that you don't know anything about. Let us make food business as our business. Food business is everybody's business, and in this case, the consumer is much more important. Don't consume food that you know can harm you tomorrow.
Make it a rule to store your foods at appropriate compartments in the fridge to keep them fresh and longer. Also take note of separating raw from processed foods to avoid cross-contamination and stay healthy.